Clint Armitage is a friend of RWR and a podcaster at radiocoffeehouse.com. Philip Weisbecker is a citizen journalist who was on the front lines during the events of January 6th. Arrested, convicted, on probation for 2 years, and now finally free, he's ready to share his story. Clint ran into Philip a few weeks ago. They were high school classmates. Philip spoke with Clint about January 6th, and today we're so fortunate to have Clint and Philip here to share Philip's story. Please welcome Clint and Philip.
Hello?
There you go. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for welcoming myself and Philip. Yeah, like Joni said, thank you, Joni. My name is Clint Armitage. I'm a podcaster, and my podcast is called Radio Coffee House, and it's on radiocoffeehouse.com. So I know there's a good amount of believers in this audience today, and I want to let you know that God loves truth. And today, we're going to hear the truth, okay? And I know that this is a divine appointment, okay? This isn't just something that just came up. Philip and I knew each other back in 1986 in high school. So we've known each other for 38 years, but we haven't spoken to each other for 34 years. It just so happened that the Lord put these circumstances together for us to come together in a chance meeting, and then we started talking, and next thing you know, things opened up for this opportunity here, for him to speak and tell his story. So this, in my belief, this is a divine kind of situation where the truth is going to be spoken here today. So I'm just going to ask Philip some questions so that he can kind of give his story. And then after we're done with that, we'll open up the floor for you guys to ask questions as well, okay? All right. So first thing I want to do is Philip, I want everybody to know you. So kind of start off with your background, where you grew up, you know, what you do for a living, all that kind of stuff, your political leanings, that kind of thing. Go ahead and start with that.
Hi. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Joni. Thank the Republican Women of Reno. I'm a native to San Diego, the second generation technically. My parents were high school sweethearts. Graduated from Claremont High School with Clint. When I was really young, I'm going to go all the way back to kindergarten just so you guys get an idea of who I am. When I was 5 years old, a San Diego police officer came into our kindergarten class, and he said, "The world is black and white. There's world's full of good people and the world's full of bad people." And I raised my hand and I said, "No, the world is gray." That's the kind of critical thinker that I've always been. So at 5 years old, I always understood that the world is not exactly one way or the other. When I went away to college at UCSB at the University in Santa Barbara, I realized that I was a little bit different than everybody because people started using the term conspiracy theorist to me on a pretty regular basis in the early 90s. I never looked at that term as a negative. I never understood why people thought that thinking critically was a negative thing. And of course, I knew immediately where the term came from, and so I never looked at it as negative. After I graduated from college with a degree in hydrology, my father had been building buildings all over California and other states, and the industry didn't want me, and the hydrology industry, so I asked my dad, what should I do? He said, be an estimator. Those are the guys that end up running national corporations. Well, on 9/11, I was a military defense contractor working on all the military bases in the Southwest Division. When the first plane hit, I said, if that thing falls down, we did it. And then the second plane hit. I didn't say anything else. 6 months later, I was given a Cleveland psychological profile by my company and asked to leave. At that moment, I decided I didn't want to work for the government and be a military contractor, so I started my own business. I've been a self-employed estimator in the construction industry since 2001, and I've always just been, I've been unlucky enough not to have a family. I've tried 3 times, so it never worked out. But so I've had a lot of time in my past to look on the internet for the truth. And when President Trump asked Americans to come to January 6th, I realized that all the times in my life that I've been telling people what really happened, the first thing they would say is, "How do you know? You weren't there." So I decided that I was going to go to DC to see the truth. And that's what I did. I'm sorry I'm getting emotional. I've never done this before.
It's okay. It's fine.
Oh.
You're gonna do it. So, Philip, when all this stuff happened and you started to kind of gain understanding of things, so like say with 9/11, what did you start to think in terms of where the country was going and where you saw things at that time?
It was really interesting. My dad was my best friend, my mentor. I loved him to death. He died in 2012. When Obama was running for election in 2008, I noticed a large envelope on my dad's dining room table, and it was for the Republican Party. And I'd always been I'd always been registered in the Green Party and Independent all through college. And I kind of laughed at him. I go, "Dad, what are you doing? You know the Clary-Pliven theory. You know it's just two guys on the same team all the time." And he said, "No, Phil," there's a thing called communism and socialism, and this guy's a communist, and you got to pick a party, man. The independent voice is not being heard in America today, so you got to pick a party. Well, my dad passed in 2012, and he never got to see President Trump, but I knew that he was the person my dad had been looking for in that party. That's where I'm at.
Okay. And so with those type of thoughts and feelings, did you start to see more things leading you in a direction to think that the country was going a certain way?
Yeah, it was actually interesting. I was given the opportunity to move to Kauai in 2016, right before the presidential election, and I wasn't able to register to vote. And it was the only presidential election that I'd ever missed, and I felt guilty for not voting for President Trump after I watched him be rejected by the Republican Party for the entire 4 years. Every single person that he put in to help him backstabbed him the entire time. So I knew that he was the independent voice. In 2020, I voted for President Trump, and I studied statistics in college, and I watched as all of the media and the news stations kept downplaying the fraud in the elections. I did my homework on the Dominion voting machines, and I just knew. I know statistics. I'm a smart person. I'm educated, and I understood what was happening. So when he asked us to go to January 6th, I said, I have to go and be there. I have to see what happens. And I've studied false flags. I just understood that this was going to be a false flag event. And if I wasn't there to tell people in California what really happened, they were all just going to say, "How do you know you weren't there?" So I made the decision to go.
Was there specific events that led up to that decision to make you go? Friends or people that you know?
Just the fact that I wanted to tell people the truth, and I didn't want to be laughed at it as not knowing because I wasn't there. I knew I had to physically be there. So I went. And I can go on forever about what happened that day.
Which we will actually get into. And so kind of, did you have friends that were, I guess, coming against you or countering everything that you were saying prior to going to them?
I'm glad you brought that up. I had a best friend that was from New Jersey. We called him Jersey. I was the best man in his wedding, and he was the best man in mine. But as Trump got more popular and I started noticing the Major League Baseball and the National Football League and all of these professional organizations leaning more left through the Trump presidency, we couldn't even watch a football game without getting into political arguments because I would just be going, "Look at all these lies they talk about all the time." And after a couple of years, he ended up having a fantastic family. He had 2 beautiful daughters. And I just realized that we were just growing apart politically. And so Trump definitely entered my life. My family's all liberal. All the women in my family are liberal. They don't understand. They watch television. They believe everything they see on TV. So yeah, I had a lot of conflict with people during Trump's first presidency.
So do you think the media landscape is totally affecting these other people's view or worldview, I guess?
Yeah, it's that, and I also believe that people, like, I asked my father when he was still alive, why did the hippies give up? And he said they gave up because it's the most important thing is to have a roof over your head and food in your belly and be able to take care of your family. Politics is something for people that have extra time and care on a deeper emotional level. But when you're just struggling paycheck to paycheck, that's all that matters. So and he also said, but to be honest, he's all, hopefully, once all of us crazy hippies get into power, maybe things will change. So you just have to wait for generations to slowly learn. Unfortunately, we've seen the brainwashing work the opposite direction in the last 20 years, which is evident by all the people that arrested me. The poor guys that arrested me were all millennials that believed 9/11. I spent an hour and a half convincing the two guys that drove me to jail that they were living a lie. I said, you guys, you're great people, but do your homework, guys. Come on.
Okay, so let's go back to January 6th, okay? So start from the beginning, kind of tell your story when you showed up and give everybody the information about, what it felt like, what you saw, how the people were, just starting from when you're at your hotel or whatever.
I've never been to Washington, D.C. in my life. This is the first time I was there, and California ran out of money when we were all supposed to go in 8th grade, so we didn't get to go. So I ended up going when I was 50 years old, 49, however old I was, and it was the first time I'd ever been there. So I went a day early and I got my bearings. I walked from the Adams Morgan neighborhood all the way down 16th Avenue. I saw these really weird, strange signs that said racists are coming, hide in your houses. Really weird propaganda everywhere up and down the street. Pictures of homosexuals having sex, saying gay pride, this, that, and the other, just randomly just posted on trees and things. The day of so I got my bearings, walked around the city, met some people. I was kind of scared on the night of the 5th because they had a rally before and there was only like 10,000 people there. So I was like, oh my gosh, should I fly all around the country for no reason? Is there going to be 100,000 people here and it's not going to be any big deal? But I'd done my homework on that as well before I went, and what I realized is that you can get 1 million people in D.C. overnight, because obviously the East Coast is much more condensed than we are here on the West Coast, so it's easier for 1 million people to get into D.C. So the morning of the event, I was walking Pennsylvania Avenue, and I ran into people in Missouri that asked them how they get there when they come. I ran into multiple people before Trump started speaking, and the vibe was fantastic. It completely changed from the 5th to the 6th. In the 5th, it was dreary, cold, sad, empty. The morning of the 6th, it was alive. There was happiness in the air, and my whole disposition changed while I was walking down 17th Avenue. I stopped at the executive building and listened to some chatter on the radio of 40 or 50 officers guarding the entrance to the executive branch, talking about disturbances here, disturbances there. And I watched 4 or 5 different patriots in the 15 minutes I stand there go up and thank the men that were in uniform protecting the executive branch for their service. I made my way to Constitution Avenue, listening to Michael Jackson's Beat It on the loudspeaker. I got in front of the Ellipse, and you could stand in line to go in there checking people for checking everybody's bags, and I realized this is going to be a big event, and I didn't want to be in a congested area, and I could feel the crowd tightening around me as it was getting closer to the time that he was going to speak. I tried to make my way from 17th Avenue to the Capitol side of the building because Simone Gold and a bunch of other speakers were scheduled to speak at the Capitol building after President Trump spoke. That's the real reason why everybody went to the Capitol. We were all going there to listen to Simone Gold and a handful of other speakers that paid for permits to be exactly where everything took place. So Trump's speech started, and it was incredible. The crowd was so tight that you couldn't move anywhere. We were all stuck in the places that we were, and it was a beautiful thing because you could watch people that didn't understand what had all happened. There was 1 million people there. It went past the Washington Monument, and they've been documenting this since the 60s. If the crowd goes past the Washington Monument, that's 750,000 people minimum. So from where I was standing on Constitution Avenue, I was talking to people, and there's 1 million people here right now. And we realized we can't move. People were like, I gotta go to the bathroom. My friends are over there. It's like, good luck, buddy, you can't move. Every 15 or 20 minutes, or every once in a while, the police would be blowing their whistles and be like, emergency, emergency, make way. And you'd see a little gap open up for a second, and people that needed to go that direction would jump in behind the police, and within 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 15, 20 people would get through, and then choom, all gone. You stuck right where you are. You made it 15 feet. Good job. I was standing next to a golf cart. When the speech ended, I jumped up on the golf cart. It was mayhem. Everybody was walking towards the Capitol building. It was interesting. On the 5th, all the sidewalks were open. On the 6th, they closed all the sidewalks all around the speech. So they shortened the width of the road by 15 feet. So when the speech ended, they had rails all blocking the sidewalks. So everybody's crammed in the street and could barely move. I've immediately, first off, I'm going to jump this thing and be first person to the Capitol to see the next speeches. I calmed down a little bit, and then I watched a lot of people younger than me jump over the thing and use the sidewalks. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do it. So I jumped over, I walked on the sidewalk. I realized Constitution Avenue was so full of people that it's going to take forever to get there. So I made a left, and I went up Pennsylvania Avenue. They closed all of Pennsylvania Avenue that day. It's like, I don't know how wide. It's a football field wide. And it's, I don't know how long, 1.5 miles to the Capitol building.
So even with all those people being packed and scrunched in there, what was the vibe? What was the feeling?
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was so calm, so mellow, so joyful.
So no violence, nothing like that.
Absolutely nothing. Nothing of that. Nothing at all. When I walked down Pennsylvania Avenue, I was taking my time, strolling. I stopped and talked to some guys begging for money on a bus stop. But when I got to the foot of Pennsylvania Avenue, I looked up, and this was the first time I actually was at the Capitol building, because of the day before I'd only been to the Capitol and the Lincoln Monument. So the first time I got there, and I looked up this mountain, and it was just a beautiful thing. It looked like a giant 4th of July parade. There were people just hanging out under the trees. It was super mellow. You couldn't tell that it had already gone into chaos up at the Capitol. I literally walked by 3 groups of people singing Kumbaya, praying. Like, literally, it just felt like the most beautiful event that I'd ever been to. When I got closer to the Capitol, I realized that there was tear gas being shot into the crowd. And I didn't understand, because there was nothing happening except tear gas being shot into the crowd. And I'm like, I don't understand. So I made my way to the left-hand side of the now infamous giant wall that people were trying to climb. And I was standing down there, and I'm looking at what I'm wearing. I'm in a nice 3-piece suit and big fancy boots, and I'm like, I'm not climbing up that wall. That's crazy. And then I looked to my left, and then I looked to my right, and I saw 40 officers marching towards me. And I'm like, oh goodness, what do they do? What are they doing to some poor protester? And I realized they weren't doing anything. They were literally just exiting stage left. They were just leaving, and all the patriots started cheering. They just left their posts. They were all guarding the stairs that everybody used to walk up to the Capitol. So I stood there for a while, and I'm like, okay, they left. And then I watched Mr. Fargo get pushed off the stairs, at the top of the stairs, right in front of me. He fell like 40 feet onto the ground into the bushes. All the patriots ran over there and helped him. Paramedics grabbed his body and took him away. I think he had a broken leg and a broken rib or something. And that's when I was like, wow, this is nasty, man. That guy just ran over and just pushed that guy off the top of that building. That was heavy. So then I walked over to where the stairs had been opened up, where they weren't guarding them anymore, and everybody was just walking up the stairs. So I'm like, all right, at that moment, at that time, I realized nobody's going to speak here. This is turning into this is going nuts. So I'm like, well, if everybody's walking up the stairs, I'm going to walk up the stairs. So as I started walking up the stairs, it was 3 or 4 people wide, shoulder to shoulder, and everybody's just taking like a half a step up the stair. Well, next to the stairs was like a 5-story scaffold set up for a speech that was supposed to happen the next day. So I'm in construction my whole life. I know what scaffolding is. So I jumped into the scaffolding and monkey barred my way to the top. When I got to the top of the stairs, I was in shock, because there was literally 15 officers standing at the top of the stairs, smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, drinking soda, just hanging out like they were at a football game waiting for halftime. And there's already a couple hundred people up there milling around outside the Capitol. and I see there's 20 police over here doing nothing. There's 3 police in riot gear standing on top of a porch on one door, and then there's like 60 patriots standing in line at another door. So I'm like, okay, well, this is it then. This is the end of my thing. I'm just going to walk around this building. So I passed the door, and I started looking in all the windows of the Capitol building. The first window I looked in had an elevator shaft. I'm like, that's really weird. Next room I looked to was like a nice sitting area with fireplaces. Then I went back out and looked out into the crowd, and there's 300,000 people screaming and yelling, "Patriots, USA, USA." And I took a video of everything. Then I walked back up and started looking in the windows again, and that's when I heard somebody yell, "They opened the door!" I'm like, okay, they opened the door, great. I've never been in the Capitol building. So I walked over to the door, and there was a broken window. I don't know who broke it. I was 100 yards away at the time. I actually walked up. There was a line of people to get in, and I walked up to the window, and I looked in it, and I'm like, this is kind of silly to jump through a window when the door's open. So I went and stood in line, got in the door. When I walked in the door, there were 3 officers standing right there. So I made eye contact with them. Everybody was going right. The whole crowd was going right. And I'm not a guy that likes crowds. I went left. And I was going towards all the rooms that I was looking in. And so I walked down that hallway, and it was interesting because it was dark. It wasn't lit. And I noticed that one of the doors was open. And then I looked even closer, and there was a African-American guard, and all the guards in that building wear dark blue suits. And he was basically hiding in the shadows, making it so it didn't look like he was there, and he was way at the end of the hallway, probably where the exit sign is. But there was a door right here that was open. And so I went and I walked in that door, and there were 5 or 6 patriots milling around in the room, just all excited, and I'm like, wow. And I realized, I just had this epiphany. I go, you know what? I think that guy opened this door for a reason. I think he wants us to vandalize this room. Because I was just looking in the window 20 minutes ago, and this door was closed. And I was like, this is a weird vibe. And I saw these guys all gather up, and there were guys in camo outfits and gas masks and all this heavy equipment. And I'm in a 3-piece suit with nothing covering my face, just regular guy, just here to witness the truth. So then I left that room, and I walked back towards the door that I was in, and the door that I walked in to get into the building, and before I even got back to the door that I came in the building, there was a guy yelling, "Come upstairs, come upstairs." So I'm like, all right, I'll come upstairs. As I started walking up the staircase, people started, it was funny. People started going, "Nancy, Nancy," like you're in elementary school teasing somebody. I'm like, why is everybody singing "Nancy, Nancy"? When I got to the top of the stairs, I looked over, and there's the entrance to the Speaker of the House right there. I'm like, how is it possible that I'm already standing? I've been in the building for 10 minutes. I'm already right at the entrance of Nancy Pelosi's office. So I went in. I walked underneath the sign that says Speaker of the House. I walked when you walk into her room, it's actually not her office. There's 3 secretaries' desks on the left-hand side with half-size walls, and then her office is behind that. Well, it was so crowded with people, I'm like, ugh, I can't be in here. I jumped into one of the secretary areas and just stood there to catch my breath and just acknowledge where I am. I wasn't standing there for 10 seconds and somebody yelled SWAT. And I literally laughed out loud. I'm like thinking to myself, what, did they jump out of her desk drawer? This is an office. Where did they come from? Well, this is so strange. This feels so much like a complete 100% setup. And I just was like, okay, so everybody did an about, as soon as the person yelled SWAT, everybody just did an about face and just walked out peacefully. When I walked out underneath that sign that said Speaker of the House, I realized that the CNN cameraman that had been following me for the last 20 minutes had his camera pointed right at me. And I went national. And I was like, okay, it's time to be a journalist again. And I turned around and pulled out my camera, and I started videotaping the people that walked out of the Speaker of the House office, and I got the guy that had knocked her sign off. I was standing right there, and he knocked the sign off, and everybody cheered. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that. And I looked over at the guy that was filming with CNN, and one thing I forgot to mention is that while we were in the hallway, he had a protector with him, and he was the only person in the whole building that I saw that day with a professional video camera. And when nobody was even talking to them, but the person that was next to him said, "Don't hurt this guy. He works for National Geographic." And I was like, okay, that was weird. And it was, why didn't the cameraman say anything? Why was it the guy standing next to him that told us he works for National Geographic? Well, then I found out later he was a CNN cameraman because I was on CNN before I even got back to San Diego. So anyway, that was like the first part of being in the Capitol, getting in there. After I left Nancy's office, I went into the rotunda and I sat down with a guy named Barry from New Hampshire, and we literally just had a political conversation for at least 40 minutes. And it felt like I was sitting in his living room in New Hampshire and by the fireplace just talking about politics of the day. It was not chaotic. It was totally passive in there. Every once in a while you'd see somebody that was super sweaty and super aggressive and they're trying to break stuff. And every time that person would do something, 10 patriots would jump on them and stop them, and it would never get physical. They would just calm the person down and say, don't do that, don't hurt anything, we're not here to break anything. I watched some guy run through one of the rotunda areas and knock down all those beautiful purple things, the purple things you see in movie theaters. Somebody knocked down all of them right in front of me, and within 2 seconds, patriots went and picked them all up as soon as it happened. And I was standing there videotaping it all, and I said, thank you for your service. And a young man in a red, white, and blue bandana looked at me and goes, I'm 5th generation veteran. You don't have to thank me. Nobody's going to mess up this building today. That's what happened in the Capitol. Everybody was peaceful that was in that building except for the people that were paid to do that event that day. That's what I saw. I was in the rotunda talking to Barry, and if you look at my, I'm on Twitter and X under the pseudonym Philip Revere because a couple of my friends coined that, told me I was Philip Revere when I came back and started telling my story. So I figured that'd be a good pseudonym or whatever for me. Well, in the rotunda, after talking to Barry, it kept getting more crowded and more crowded, and eventually a woman yelled, they're not letting us out, they're locking us in. And I looked at Barry and I go, well, I guess we've been in here long enough. We better try to find our way out. But I'd been sitting in the rotunda for so long that I realized all the action was coming from 3 areas, and one door never had any action. So I went right over to that door, and sure enough, that was the door out. But when we tried to get out, there's 500 people standing in the hallway trying to get out, and there's one Capitol police officer with a baton hitting everybody trying to come in the door, but everybody behind him's trying to leave. And at that point, I'm like looking, and there's like aggressive patriots trying to leave. They're talking amongst themselves, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get this guy to calm down? And at that moment, I look over, and there's a motorcycle cop that must have been 6'8" with his helmet on still. Giant man towering over the entire crowd, and he walks through from where I'd come from the rotunda, and he walks right up to the guard that was the Capitol guard that was an older gentleman in a blue suit, not the guy that was from the Capitol Police doing the beating. He was just standing there, and he was an old man, and I was standing right next to him, and the police officer said, give me the authority and tell me how I can get all these people out of this building, sir. And the old gentleman in the blue suit motioned to the motorcycle cop, and he said, come down here. And at the level that we're on, all the doors have stairs that go down. And they walked down a flight of stairs, and they had a little discussion, and then they came back up. And I looked at him, and the guard just went and stood there and just went right back to the position he was. And the motorcycle cop just kind of stood next to him. And I looked at him, I go, what are you guys going to do? And the older gentleman said, there's nowhere to go. If you go down those stairs, you're going to get shot. This is the only way out. So then the motorcycle cop looked at him, and he looked at me, and he looked at all the patriots. And the motorcycle cop picked up the guy that was beating everybody up, moved him out of the way, and walked out the building. So, like I told all my friends, I walked in like Gandhi, I walked out like Gandhi, just like the 5,000 other people that went in that day. Absolutely no violence was inflicted. Every time I saw somebody walk up to a guard in that building, they stood 3 feet away from them, and they said, why don't you join the Motion for Truth? What are you doing protecting these criminals? You should be on our side. And I never saw any conflict in that building the entire time I was in there, except for people that were being paid to do it. The one time I was in an area where there was going to be conflict, you could feel the tension rise, and they added more guards to what was probably a staircase down to where the senators were, but the patriots stayed 3 feet away at the whole time that they were there. When people started getting aggressive and saying, we're going through this door, we're going through this door, everybody just walked away. There was nobody that wanted to put any aggressions towards anybody that was in that building. I didn't see any aggression inside that building the entire time I was there. I was actually completely and totally shocked when I was a quarter mile away, and there was a little old weird looking dude going around telling everybody somebody got shot. And I was like, no way, man, I was in that building for an hour. There was tear gas and there were rubber bullets, but there was no violence going on in that building except for the police attacking the protesters. So I couldn't believe that anybody had actually been shot. And that's when I found out Ashley had been shot. But that was not what I saw I didn't see any violence inside the building, and I was shocked to find out I was in there for over an hour. So.
Okay, so we had talked about before some of the agitation that was happening outside of the building, and you mentioned specific officers that were working outside, and
It
one
was-
particular one.
Oh yeah. So I figured this out from Stop Hate on Twitter. Stop Hate put out a fantastic video of its actual footage from the officers, and it shows how one single officer was responsible for, I'm going to make up a percentage right now, but probably 80% of the violence that was sent out into the crowd before anybody did anything was all by one officer. One officer was just going around like a maniac, grabbing smoke bombs off everybody and launching them into the crowd, looking for extra bullets, and there were no supervisors calming this guy down. This guy was just going around attacking people everywhere. He was panicking. Same thing happened to me inside when I was sitting with Barry. Barry had 2 knee braces on, and he was in his late 60s probably. And then while we were sitting there talking, a dozen Capitol police officers all came in riot gear, and they all spread out. The tallest, skinniest one had a complete nylon black mask over his entire face, and he didn't speak. And he ran up to Barry with his baton and got right in Barry's face, and he waved it at Barry. And Barry didn't even hesitate. He said, "Calm down, young man. I'm old and tired. Look at these knees. Just give me a little time to rest." The guy knew he wasn't getting anywhere with Barry, so he looked at me, and he waved his thing at me, and he didn't make a sound. He just waved his baton in my face. And I looked at him and I go, "Hey man, I'm with Barry." I just leaned back, "I'm with Barry, man, just please." So he went back into his little group, and he asked for, I could see that he was asking for permission to attack us. And luckily they'd been given the stand down order not to attack us. That actual video I have pinned on my Twitter account. You can see it. It doesn't make any sense because the guy's not speaking. He's just waving his stick at us and not saying anything. And he didn't even have a face. It was the weirdest. It was like being in Star Wars or something. It was bizarre. But yeah, that's my interaction with the police officers in the building that day.
So after this happened, let's go past this now. What has been the result since coming back from the Capitol that day?
So I was in a unique position because I was wearing this shirt under my blue under my blue suit. And I believe the reason why they used my image, I was sent my image on 60 Minutes, ABC News and World Report, CNN, Tucker Carlson. Every news station used my image because you got Speaker of the House behind me. I'm just standing there. Here I am. I fit the position of a Proud Boy. They framed the Proud Boys for being the instigators of this, and they mistakenly thought I was a Proud Boy. I'm just a surfer from San Diego. My first fiance modeled for this shirt in the 90s, and it's very sentimental to me. And I just wanted to wear red, white, and blue. So that's why my image was used on television, was to frame the Proud Boys. That's what I think. After the event, before I even got home, my sister said my younger sister's completely brainwashed, and she sent me this horrible text message. I was a total criminal. My next door neighbor I've known for 20 years immediately fired me from building a garage behind his house. Said, "Don't even email me back. Never talk to me again." I have land in Mexico. I had bought it after my dad died, and I knew that when I crossed the border, I'm also a person that believes in the law and the Constitution, and I know there is no law in the United States of America that says you have to have a passport to cross the border. And I've been native to San Diego. I've been crossing the border my entire life without a passport. We don't use passports to cross the border in San Diego. Tijuana's our backyard. So I've been refusing to use my passport to cross the border, so they put me in secondary for 10 years before 9/11. So I know all of the Border Patrol agents in Tecate like personal friends, because they always put me in secondary and hassle me. So I knew when I was January 6th and I was on TV, they're gonna hassle me. So I waited until one of my friends was going down to Tecate, and I could ride and have witnesses with me when they arrested me, because I knew they were gonna arrest me, but I didn't tell my friend. I felt bad because he had to drive all the way to LA, and it took him 4 hours longer that day. So anyway, they put us in secondary, and then they pulled me, and then half an hour later they pulled me out of the car, and that's when I realized the anti-terrorist unit was coming to see me. They had to drive from San Diego Airport out to Tecate. They did a good cop, bad cop thing with me. They treated me, one guy treated me like a hero, the other guy just stayed silent. That was February, that was 3 weeks after the event. Then nothing happened. Then they created the January 6th committee. I sold my house at the beach through all of this. I'd been living in Hawaii. I wanted to live in the mountains anyway. I ended up buying land behind an illegal checkpoint on the freeway. You know, in America, they have all these illegal checkpoints where they pull you over and ask you your citizenship. Well, I live behind one of those now because I bought land 10 miles from the Mexican border. Well, going through that checkpoint is where they ended up arresting me. The FBI put out a warrant for my arrest, and it was just as easy as putting a cone in front of my car. So they didn't raid my house because I lived on top of a mountain. I found out later they were chasing me with helicopters and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, wasting probably hundreds of thousands of dollars following a citizen journalist like myself for no reason except I was telling the truth. Another interesting fact is that I was actually kicked off Facebook in 2017 for talking about vaccines, I believe, or just being an honest person telling the truth. I've never been able to get back on Facebook since 2017, but guess what? A month after January 6th, I got a weird invitation back to Facebook. So I got on Facebook and I joined a group called Common Ground, and it was a bunch of crazy liberal rich women in La Jolla just complaining about the world. But a couple cool surfer guys were on there too, trying to talk to them, because it was called Common Ground. Well, when I ended up getting convicted 6 months later by the January 6th committee, the only thing in my sentencing was all the things I said on Facebook. They didn't have any evidence about what I did that day. It was just, look what he said on Facebook, look what he said on Facebook, look what he said on Facebook. And then right after they arrested me, I got kicked off Facebook, and I can't get on it to this day. I've never been allowed on Instagram ever, because they're both owned by Meta. So yeah, I've been totally silenced for before January 6th, completely silenced after January 6th, and totally terrified to talk about it until I knew that I was off probation. I had good probation officers, I had bad probation officers. I could go on forever about that stuff.
Okay, so what, after the arrest, you got on probation, and was there more stuff that happened? Did you get persecuted? Jobs, you know, you have your own company. How did that work out?
Yeah. All of that stuff happened. I got really lucky for one time. I got offered a job in Merced, and guess what happens when you live in San Diego and you have to work in Merced? You got to fly on the airplanes. That's when I found out I was on this secret terrorist watch list, and I couldn't check into the airport. They set up a special anti-terrorist unit every time I got on my plane at my gate in San Diego and Fresno every week for a month. And they acted like it's random people, but I'm the only one being pulled out and grabbed everywhere in my body and everything in my things at the gate after they've already done it to me and not let me check in with my luggage, not let me use any of the modern conveniences of everybody else. Actually, Alaska Airlines had to spend 45 minutes on the phone with the State Department just to issue me a ticket for the first month that I went to work in Merced. So it was terror. It was just, they were terrorizing me to the nth degree, the TSA was, to the point where they set up a table at my booth one time after 2 months of this, and I was so sick and frustrated with it, when they were done, I just grabbed my suitcase really fast and yanked it off the table, and they accused me of attacking the TSA agent with my suitcase. So then the next time I came through, I was prepared, and I never video anything. I probably should have been videoing all this stuff, but I'm old and lazy, and I just want to get on with my life. But after they did this to me that time, I realized it was getting serious, because what I did is I pulled out my camera after they accused me of hitting with the suitcase, and I asked them all for their names. I went to each one of them and asked them for their names, and they all covered up their badges and turned around and got all paranoid and freaked out. So I'm like, okay, this is getting serious. So the next Monday when I went, I was prepared, and I sat and I videoed them for an hour and a half waiting for my flight. I mean, the same group of people, I call them actors. I don't even think they're real TSA agents. I think they're just specifically there to harass me, and that's what they were. The same African-American lady that was the supervisor the 2 weeks before came over, random, pull you out to the side, let's do it again. So this time I had my camera on, and I went to record the guy. He goes, "You can't record me." And I'm like, okay. And it was the same guy that harassed me, told me I attacked him with the suitcase. So I said, okay. And I just set my phone down on the Alaska counter and stood there to get through my normal harassment. I've grown up in construction with two dads my whole life. And when I get angry, the only thing that I got is the First Amendment, and it flies hard. So I have an 11-minute video of me just going off on this guy. 3/4 of the way through the thing, they go as slow as they possibly can. They try to act like they're not doing anything wrong. They try to instigate you to do something against them, and I just talk like I am now. Well, at one point, he was a heavy-set guy, and he leaned down, and he had to like go through take my shoes off and play with my feet for a while. And they had a guy they had a guy hiding behind a pillar, holding his hand around the corner, videotaping my whole interaction with them. He didn't realize I was I was videotaping him. I'm flipping him the bird. I'm telling him, what, you can get your videos, whatever, bro, you doing it to me. I'm talking back to him. A week later, I get a letter from the president of the TSA that says I'm being held for kicking the TSA agent in the face. So they're accusing me of kicking him in the face. So then I wrote back a whole letter that said, I got to video the whole thing, lady. Come on, bring it. And then I got a letter of me a week later saying, we're just going to let you off with a warning. So yeah, that was my TSA experience. So Border Patrol, TSA, FBI, every agency that they had was after me for going there and telling the truth.
How has it affected your job opportunities and stuff like that?
I'm sure it affected me. Like I said, my next door neighbor fired me immediately. It was a $100,000 job that I didn't get. I can't get hired by corporations. I probably applied for 80 jobs last year because now you can apply to jobs so easily with ZipRecruiter and all this stuff. Corporations don't even call me back. I went through 3 interviews with with a couple different developers. I got to the point where I just gave up and just said, I'm a J6er right in the beginning of the interview because I'd wasted so much time interviewing, and then they finally figure out who I am, and then they don't hire me. So yeah, it's massively affected my client list.
So what compels you to come and speak about this going forward?
My whole purpose of going to the peaceful protest on January 6th was to tell people the truth. That's why I went, and that's why I'm doing this today. That's the whole point, just to tell the truth.
Now we're gonna. Is there any last thing you want to say? I'm going to open it up for questions here. But is there any last minute things that you want to talk about before we get into questions?
No, just thank you all for coming and listening to me speak.
Okay. All right, Joni's going to pass the mic around. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions for Philip. So anything that you want to know, I mean, he's open to all of it. So make sure you ask those questions that are burning in your head, because I'm sure a ton of people in here want to know that as well. Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. I would like to know what your prison experience was like.
My prison experience was very interesting. When I was locked up in the Metropolitan Correctional Facility in downtown San Diego, it was during the pandemic, and it was 23 and a half hours in a cell with one other man. You're only allowed out to either make a phone call, try to make a phone call, which they make as hard as possible. If you don't know the system, it's crazy. Or take a shower. So either you want to try to contact your lawyer or family, or you want to be clean for the next day. So that was, and then they came up with a clerical error, the public defender made a mistake. So I ended up doing 8 days in the federal jail, and then I owed them 22 more days because we were all illegally sentenced to jail and probation, which 2 years later the Supreme Court overturned. It says right in the law, or probation or jail time. Well, all the judges in DC broke the law and gave everybody both. Then I had a very liberal probation officer in San Diego, and she just had to put me in jail. And I had all these arguments about what my jail time was. The judge ordered me to do every weekend for 10 weeks, 3-day weekends for 10 weeks. And I said, no, dude, I'll do all 30 right off the bat. Come on, I'll take 10 books with me. I'll get this over with. I owed 22 days. Then the judge in D.C. was a very, very misguided old man, Judge Hogan, that retired immediately after sentencing me. But he said I could do 2 separate 15 weeks. But he made it 2 separate 15 weeks, and I'd already done 8. So then I had to go back and say, I already did 8, I only owe you 22. Well, my probation officer put me in for 15 more days, and I was able to go into it's called a half, it's a lower security prison where prisoners go before they get let out into the public. And they put me into one of those instead of the real federal prison. But when I got there, everybody in the whole place knew I didn't belong, and I got attacked and beat up. I got attacked physically by 2 different people within a day and a half, And so I went to the supervisor, and she looked at me, and she goes, "You don't belong here, man. We got a whole wing over here we're not using. How do you feel about just being in solitary confinement for 2 weeks?" And I said, "Sure, I'll just read my books." So yeah, the last 15 days I did completely by myself in a giant building. It was weird.
Hi. This is a subject very near and dear to my heart because it's only because we live so far away that I wasn't there on that day. I would have been your experience, could have been my experience. So I'm very sympathetic to you. My question to you is what was your crime? Because entering the Capitol building is not a crime.
They charged every single person in the first 1,200 the exact same 4 crimes, except for people that they could get more on. But everybody like me got the same exact 4 crimes. 3 of them were completely invented by the Attorney General, Michael Graves, in D.C. The 3rd one was parading and picketing. So I pled guilty to parading and picketing because I knew if I went to trial, they would throw the book at me, and I knew I would still be on probation today if I didn't just give up. I had to give up. The thing is, people don't understand nobody knows what pretrial is. In this country, if you commit a federal crime, you're guilty until proven innocent. They automatically take your passport and your gun when you're charged. They made me give my passport up and give all my guns to my parents when they charged me. So you're guilty immediately in this government all the way since 1985. And it's just been getting worse and worse and worse.
Is anything ever going to come out about this with more information? Do you see that this will ever become more public?
For sure. Tucker Carlson's doing a great job. Twitter's doing a great job.
And we all know this, but
when more of us,
a lot of people don't know still.
When more of us, like me, get over our PTSD, which I didn't even think was real until I feel like I've suffered from it now, we're gonna make people understand. Yeah. This is the first time I've ever spoken in public, but I've been wanting to do this for 2 years.
Philip, thank you for being here. I was excited to see you because I was there. I didn't go to the Capitol. I had to pee really bad. But what you said about the Patriots and just being among them, and we were praising God. We were praising God. We were USA. We were loving on each other. It was the best weekend ever, besides when I went on honor flight with World War II and Korean veterans.
The pilot for Frontier Airlines congratulated all of us and thanked all of us for our service when I flew out of DC the next day. And I was more scared, and I've never been more scared in my life when I realized I made a mistake of staying in the District of Columbia that night. Because as you know, they closed the entire city. In my weird circumstances, I ended up winning an Airbnb from a homosexual African-American guy that was an aide in the Capitol building that day. And he asked me 10 times, "Why are you coming to DC on January 6th? Why are you coming to DC on January 6th? And I said, "I'm just here to see the sights, sir." Well, as soon as I got out of that building, I wasn't halfway back to his Airbnb, and he called me and said, "Do you have enough food? Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'm absolutely fine." He said, "Okay, because they're going to lock down the whole city. I just wanted to make sure you're okay."
Well, God bless that guy. But
Yeah.
When I was amongst people, you could tell who was not us.
I watched 5 people in Antifa in all black uniforms change into Trump gear under the pine trees at the bottom of those stairs that day.
Like, you could see their
And we all called them out. There were 100 pages going, "Look at these people changing clothes. Look at these Antifa people." It happened everywhere.
And then
The
we
police
were
just
all
ignored
on
it.
like WhatsApp texting each other videos and videos and videos. The officers just inviting them in.
This was a
Inviting
legitimate
them
tour.
in.
I've never been to DC. This was a legitimate tour. It was 100% planned and orchestrated, guaranteed
Absolutely.
fact.
I believe that too. And conspiracy, whatever, call me that. I don't care.
It's called the
'Cause
truth.
It is, because now everything was true about COVID, everything. Don't do it again. Don't. Do not fall for that. We have to be strong and courageous. And I just want to tell you, God was with you. Like, no weapons formed against you shall prosper, saith the Lord.
Nobody felt afraid that day. Nobody was afraid. And I just want to mention the men that died again. Kevin Greason and Benjamin Phillips were murdered by the Capitol Police that day by getting shot with tear gas and smoke bombs when they're hundreds of yards away. They were very deep in the crowd, and those old men and those gentlemen died. Roseanne Boyland was not on drugs. She was a totally beautiful person, and they murdered her. And nobody talks about them. 3 other people were murdered, not just Ashley Weinhoff. And that's her name. They accused me of saying that I said Ashley Babbitt didn't exist. They misquoted me in all the newspapers, and it got regurgitated in Vanity Fair and 1,000 other things. I said she's not from Ocean Beach. I'm a surfer from San Diego. We're local. I owned a house in Ocean Beach for 25 years. I don't say from OB. Nobody says they're from OB. But people say they're from someplace. You went to school there. Weinhoff was from East County. Her name was Weinhoff. She was married to a guy named McAtee. Her second husband's name was Babbitt. That's all I said. They misquoted me up the yin-yang to make it look like I was crazy. I'm just telling the truth.
Wow, thank you. I'm just kind of curious, did you know the guy and what maybe had happened to him, the guy with the horns?
At this point, I think that he is a plant. I don't know that Jacob Chancellor is 100% genuine. Either that or he's just mentally not there, because I've met him twice at Turning Point USA's Phoenix event. And I asked him why we weren't organizing and why he wasn't doing anything to get the January 6ers together and why we weren't a bigger voice. And he said, "We absolutely can't do that. That's a very bad idea." And he ran away. And they don't put his adrenochrome stuff up. You know, he had a very famous interview that he did before we went in the Capitol about adrenochrome and the Clintons and all this stuff. So, and I don't know how he got invited in. I just don't, it seems like he was part of the whole plan. It seems like he's part of the setup to me, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just don't like that guy because I met him and he had a weird vibe.
We have time for one
Yeah,
more
well, they let
question.
him out. They let him out early. They didn't let anybody else out early. How many people are still in the DC gulag that haven't even gone to trial? That's what people don't understand. There's hundreds of people that are guilty until proven innocent in this country.
One more question? Or maybe not. All right, let's thank Clint and Philip so much for their presentation.